My name is Walter Hall. I'm 62 years old, a retired construction foreman who spent 4 decades managing crews across Arizona. I've poured concrete in 100-degree heat, hung steel beams 3 stories high, and slept more nights in motels than I can count. My back aches when the weather shifts, and the scars on my hands tell stories I've long stopped repeating. But one thing I always held on to was this ranch. 3 acres of stubborn land outside Tucson, bought with sweat and every overtime check I could scrape together. When my wife, Marlene, passed 3 years ago, the house grew quieter than I thought a home could. My son, Ethan, and his wife, Megan, moved in soon after. At first it felt like a blessing. Company at the dinner table, someone else to keep the lights warm. Ethan said it was temporary, just until he and Megan got their finances in order. I believed him. Fathers want to believe their sons. That Tuesday, I came back from the hardware store with a bag of nails and a new hinge for the barn door. What I found in the front yard stopped me cold. My old army trunk, dented but still locked, sat in the dirt beside Marlene's cedar chest. Next to it lay a stack of my shirts, the ones she used to fold so neatly, now spilling out like discarded rags. I picked up the cedar chest, brushed off the dust, and carried it to the porch. That's when Megan stepped outside, arms crossed, her expression harder than sun-baked clay. "You don't need all this clutter, Walter," she said. "We're trying to make space. The house is crowded." Clutter? My throat tightened. That chest belonged to Marlene. Those shirts, she cut me off, her tone flat. "You should think about finding somewhere else. Maybe assisted living. We need room for our future." The word "our" echoed louder than her voice. I stood there with the chest in my hands, staring at the woman my son had chosen. For the first time, the ranch didn't feel like home. It felt like a place I was being pushed out of, piece by piece. And when I looked through the window, I saw Ethan at the kitchen table, signing a stack of papers I'd never seen before. That night, Ethan came to my room, holding a folder. He didn't sit. He just stood in the doorway, as if he owned the house and I was a tenant late on rent. "Dad," he began, "I've signed an agreement with a partner. We're launching a logistics company. Big opportunity. Contracts lined up, investors waiting. But I needed collateral." I set down Marlene's photo album. "Collateral for what?" "The house," he said plainly. "Technically, it's community property. Mom's share transferred to me after she passed, so I had rights." Megan and I agreed. This is the smartest move. I felt my chest tighten. "Your mother's share was never meant to be sold. And you don't mortgage your father's roof without asking." Ethan sighed, annoyed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Dad, you don't need this much space anymore. You're retired. You've got Social Security, your truck. This is about the future. My future." "And what about mine?" I asked quietly. He hesitated for half a second before saying, "Yours is already behind you." Those words cut deeper than any beam or saw ever had. I stood, fists clenched at my sides. "You throw me out of this house, Ethan. You throw away everything I built, every nail, every paycheck I sweated for. You dishonor your mother's memory." Megan appeared in the hallway, arms folded. "We're not dishonoring anything. We're moving forward. You should start packing what you really need." I looked between them, the son I'd raised, the daughter-in-law who spoke like judge and jury, and realized I was already outnumbered in my own home. I slept in the truck that night, staring at the porch light burning like an accusation. The next evening, Megan set the table like nothing was wrong. Pork chops, mashed potatoes, green beans. The smells that once meant family now felt like bait for a conversation I didn't want. Ethan carved into his chop without looking at me. Dad, we should talk about timelines. The bank needs confirmation you'll vacate within 30 days. Gives us time to transition. I laid down my fork. This ranch is not a line item in your business plan. It's my home. Your mother's home. I built it with 40 years of busted knuckles. You think you can just erase that with a signature? He finally looked up, his eyes cold. It's already done. You can fight it, but all you'll do is waste what little time you've got left. The words stung worse than the paperwork. Ethan, I said softly, your mother wanted you to have roots, not to sell them off. Don't you remember her sitting right here saying this land was our anchor? For a flicker of a second, something wavered in his face. Then Megan spoke. That was before. We're building a different life. You should respect that. Respect. The way she said it twisted the knife. I pushed back from the table. The scrape of my chair against the floor sounded like a door slamming shut. If you can live with this betrayal, then fine. But don't expect me to sit here and pretend I accept it. No one answered. The only sound was the clink of silverware as they kept eating, like my words hadn't even landed. That night I packed a duffel, just clothes, Marlene's cedar box, and my father's watch. I carried them out to the truck, the old Ford groaning as I climbed in. Through the windshield I watched the house glow warm with lights, shadows of Ethan and Megan moving room to room. It looked like a home, but not mine anymore. I pulled a blanket over my lap, reclined the seat, and listened to coyotes howl across the desert. The stars blurred as my eyes burned hot. And for the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in the only place I'd ever belonged. By Saturday, word had already spread down the gravel road. Small towns don't keep secrets, especially ugly ones. I'd stopped at the diner for black coffee when Mrs. Alvarez, who lived 2 doors down, slid into the booth across from me. Her face was tight with pity and disapproval, all mixed together. Walter, I'm sorry, but I have to tell you. The night after you left, Ethan and Megan threw a party. Music loud, cars all up and down the road. Folks said they were celebrating a new beginning. I stared into my coffee, the steam blurring her face. She lowered her voice. I saw them myself, carrying your recliner out onto the porch so their friends could sit in it, laughing, drinking, like you'd been erased. I swallowed hard, the bitterness sticking in my throat. After she left, I sat there until the coffee turned cold. My son hadn't just taken the house. He'd paraded it, like claiming a trophy. That evening, I went to the church kitchen for the community dinner. My plate was a mess of chili and cornbread when I heard a voice I hadn't in years. Walt Hall, you old dog. Thought you were too stubborn to retire. I turned. George Patterson, not kin to Megan, just coincidence, stood there with the same crooked grin he'd worn on the job sites 30 years back. He'd been a steel man, tough as rebar, now grayer, but still solid. We sat at a corner table. George listened while I told him everything. Ethan's papers, Megan's cold dismissal, the trunk on the lawn. When I finished, he leaned back, shaking his head. You're telling me he sold half that property for startup cash? Didn't sell, I muttered. Mortgaged, against my share too. Claimed it's legal. George's brow furrowed. I know land values. That ranch of yours is worth near double what he's bragging about. If he got a loan, it's underpriced. Maybe deliberately. Something stinks. I hadn't let myself think beyond betrayal, but George's words pierced the fog. You think there's more? I think you've been played, Walt. Paper trails don't lie, but they can sure as hell be forged. You need to see the contract. I looked down at my calloused hands. 40 years of holding blueprints and hammers, and somehow I'd lost the one thing I thought unshakable. George slapped the table lightly. Don't roll over. You still got fight in you. I'll help however I can. I met his eyes. Saw the same fire we'd shared on job sites when deadlines pressed and steel bent the wrong way. Maybe I wasn't finished after all. That night, back in my truck, I unfolded the eviction notice the bank had mailed. My name typed neat, my signature scrawled at the bottom. Only it didn't look like mine. Not quite. And for the first time, I felt the spark of something I hadn't in weeks. Not just anger, a plan forming. The following week blurred into something I barely recognized as living. Days began in the church parking lot where my truck idled for heat. Ended with me counting change to buy gas station coffee. At the community kitchen, I lined up with men half my age wearing worn boots and hollow eyes. The volunteers smiled, but some of the townsfolk whispered. He gave his house away to his boy, one said behind me. Didn't fight for it. Another muttered, maybe he's slipping. Old men forget things. I wanted to turn, to shout the truth, but the words stuck like gravel in my throat. So I ate my chili in silence, my spoon scraping metal, while the world quietly rewrote me as a fool. Back in the truck, I opened the cedar box Marlene had left me. Inside were 3 things: her wedding band, a bundle of letters she wrote when I was overseas, and the photo of us in front of the ranch the day we signed the deed. Her smile was wide, mine tired but proud. That house wasn't just lumber and nails. It was a promise we'd kept. Now my son was dismantling it one signature at a time. On Thursday, a courier knocked on the truck window. He didn't even look me in the eye, just handed over an envelope. Inside was a formal notice. You are required to vacate the property within 10 days of this letter. 10 days. A life measured down to numbers on a page. I sat there until the sun slid below the desert hills, the orange light spilling across the paper like fire. My knuckles went white around it. That night the wind rocked the truck, coyotes yipping in the distance. I pulled the blanket tighter, Marlene's photo clutched against my chest, and whispered into the dark, I'm sorry. I don't know how to fight this. For the first time, I wondered if Ethan was right. Maybe my future really was already behind me. 2 nights later, I was nursing a paper cup of burnt coffee in the church hall when George dropped into the chair across from me. He studied me a long moment before speaking. Walt, I've seen you swing a beam into place with 20 men shouting directions and the wind howling like a freight train. You never blinked, and now you're telling me you'll let your own kid push you into the dirt? I kept my eyes on the coffee. He's my son. What am I supposed to do? Drag him to court? George leaned in, voice low but sharp. Supposed to fight. You think he's giving you a choice? He already shoved you out. He forged something. I can smell it. That's not business, Walt. That's theft. The word hung heavy. Theft. Not family squabble, not misunderstanding. Theft. I looked at George, the old spark in his weathered face. What if I can't prove it? You've got friends, records. Hell, I still got contacts at the recorder's office. You're not alone. Not unless you decide to be. Something shifted inside me then. Maybe it was the steel in his tone. Maybe the memory of Marlene's smile on that deed photo. Whatever it was, it pulled me upright in my chair. You really think I can take him on? George's grin was quick and fierce. I know you can, but you've got to decide if you want to. Because if you keep sleeping in that truck, Ethan wins without lifting a finger. I sat back, the weight of despair loosening just enough for air to slip in. My son had taken my roof, but I still had my name, my history, and maybe, just maybe, enough fight left for one more battle. I drained the coffee, stood, and met George's eyes. Then let's fight. I want to hit back. George spread a stack of papers across the church table like we were back on a job site laying out blueprints. Only this time the structure wasn't steel. It was my life. Step 1, he said, tapping the eviction notice I'd been carrying around. We compare this signature with your real ones. Old checks, tax forms, permits from the union hall. You've got decades of handwriting out there. If it's forged, we'll prove it. I nodded slowly. My gut had screamed forgery from the start, but hearing George frame it like an engineer's problem steadied me. Step 2, he went on. We get eyes on what they've been doing since you left. Neighbors always have cameras, doorbells, security systems. If Ethan and Megan tossed your things like trash, someone caught it. I pictured my recliner on the porch, Mrs. Alvarez's words about the party. Evidence wasn't just paper, it was behavior. And step 3, I asked. George leaned closer, lowering his voice. We need a lawyer who knows land disputes. Someone who won't flinch when family's involved. Campbell down on Main Street still practicing. Last I heard, I said. Good. Once we've got proof in hand, we hand it to him. Let the law do what fists can't. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like balance returning, like a scaffold set on solid ground. George gathered the papers, his jaw tight. But we don't wait. I'll talk to a buddy at the recorder's office, see if he can pull the deed files. You check your old union locker for signed documents. Tomorrow we start comparing. I exhaled slowly, the fog of despair thinning. All right, tomorrow. George slapped my shoulder. That's the man I remember. Later, parked outside the ranch in my truck, I watched the glow of lights through the windows. Laughter spilled faintly into the night. Ethan thought the walls kept him safe. I reached under the seat and pulled out the small audio recorder George had given me. He'd shown me how to clip it beneath the porch rail where nobody would notice. As I crouched in the dark, fastening the device in place, I whispered to myself, You wanted me gone, Ethan. But I'm not done. The next morning, George picked me up in his old Chevy and drove straight to the county recorder's office. His buddy Carl, a clerk with 30 years in the job, slipped us into a side room stacked with file boxes. Carl didn't ask many questions. He just slid a folder across the table. This is the deed transfer Ethan filed, he said. Certified copy, notarized. My hands shook as I opened it. There was my name, scrawled across the bottom. Only it wasn't. The loop on the W bent wrong, the T didn't cross where it should. My real signature had weight, rhythm. This one looked stiff, like someone copying a pattern they didn't understand. George compared it to an old check I dug from my union locker. See here? Pressure points. Your hand digs in at the start of every line. This forgery skates flat. Amateur, but enough to fool a bank. The bile rose in my throat. My own son had built his empire on a forged name. That afternoon, Mrs. Alvarez knocked on George's workshop door. She carried a flash drive in a trembling hand. I wasn't sure if I should get involved, but my door camera caught something the night they threw your things out. George plugged it in. The screen lit with grainy footage. Ethan and Megan dragging my recliner across the porch, laughing. Finally free of the old man, Megan said, her voice clear as a bell. Ethan raised a beer can like a toast. Good riddance. Now we can build our future without dead weight." The party crowd cheered behind them. My recliner, my evening refuge for 20 years, became a joke, a prop in their celebration. I clenched the table until my knuckles turned white. George muttered, "Damn, that's cruelty on camera." 2 proofs now. The falsified deed and the footage of them discarding me like garbage. Paper and picture. Ink and image. George leaned forward, eyes burning. "We take this to Campbell. With evidence like this, the judge won't just pause their loan. He'll want an investigation." I nodded, my voice rough. They thought throwing me out meant I'd stay quiet. But this tape screams louder than I ever could. That night, back in my truck, I replayed the clip until the battery died. Every laugh, every cruel word, fueled me. Ethan thought he'd erased me. What he didn't know was that his own arrogance had just written my case for me. Sunday afternoon, I walked up the porch steps like I still belonged there. George waited in the truck at the end of the driveway, engine running in case things went south. Megan opened the door, her smile vanishing the second she saw the folder in my hand. "Walter, you can't just—" "I can," I said, brushing past her. "This is still my house." Ethan sat in the living room with his laptop. My granddaughter, Laura, only 10, sat cross-legged on the rug, coloring in a book. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Grandpa?" Ethan closed the laptop hard. "Dad, we've talked about this. You need to leave." "Not before you hear this." I dropped the deed copy on the coffee table. "Your mother's signature? Forged. Not even close." He smirked, leaning back. "Legal system doesn't care about your opinion. The bank approved it." I pulled out the flash drive, connected it to the TV. The footage played. Ethan and Megan hauling my recliner onto the porch, raising a beer, laughing about being finally free of the old man. Laura's crayon slipped from her fingers. "Daddy, why are you saying that?" Megan paled. "Turn that off." I ignored her, letting the clip run. The neighbors' cheers, Ethan's toast, Megan's words, "Good riddance." Laura looked between us, her eyes wet. "You threw Grandpa's stuff away?" For the first time, Ethan faltered, but it lasted only a second. Then his jaw hardened. "That video proves nothing. You were leaving anyway." I stepped closer. "I didn't leave. You forced me out, and you forged my name to do it." His voice rose, sharp. "You can't prove that in court. Banks trust paperwork, not old men with grudges. You think a judge will take your word over mine? Over notarized documents?" Laura's tears spilled. "Daddy, stop." I pulled my phone, thumb hovering the play button on Derek's own threats I'd captured earlier that week. But I held back, one bullet at a time. Ethan stood, shoulders squared. "You're wasting your breath. You bring this into court. I'll bury you in motions until you can't breathe. You'll run out of money long before I run out of lawyers." Megan touched his arm, whispering, but he shook her off. He leaned in, his voice low enough only I heard. "You're done, old man. And when the judge signs off, I'll make sure you never step foot here again." I stared straight back. "We'll see who's done." Laura's sobs filled the silence, her small hands covering her face. Ethan pointed to the door. "Get out before I call the sheriff. Next time, don't bother coming back." I picked up the folder, slipped the flash drive into my pocket, and walked out. George met my eyes as I climbed into his truck. "How bad?" I looked once more at the house, the porch where my granddaughter now cried while her parents argued. "He thinks he can bury me," I said. "Let's show him what being buried really looks like." By Monday morning, my phone was blinking red. 3 new voicemails, all from Ethan. The first was calm, almost polite. "Dad, stop this nonsense. Drop whatever stunt you're planning. Let the deal close, and I'll make sure you're comfortable. You'll have a stipend, no worries." The second came an hour later, sharper. "You think a shaky video and your word mean anything? Courts care about documents. You push this, you'll lose everything. Truck, pension, pride. Don't test me." The third was pure venom. "You take this to court, and I swear you won't see another day on that ranch. I'll make sure of it." I replayed that last one twice, the bile thick in my throat. Threats on tape. He wasn't even hiding anymore. That afternoon, I met Campbell in his law office. The old attorney tapped his pen against the forged deed. "We've got grounds, but injunctions take time. If Ethan pushes the loan through before the judge reviews this, the bank's hands are tied until a full trial." "How much time?" I asked. Campbell frowned. "Hard to say. Days, maybe." When I left, the desert sun was dipping low. That's when I heard someone call my name. It was Linda, a young woman from the local real estate office. Sharp eyes, tidy suit, the kind who always noticed more than she said. She glanced around nervously before stepping closer. "Mr. Hall, I shouldn't even be telling you this," she whispered. "But Ethan and Megan filed a rush order. They're trying to finalize within 72 hours. Quick close, wire transfer already in motion. Once the funds hit, undoing it will be nearly impossible." My gut clenched. 3 days? She nodded. "I don't know what you did to anger him, but he's desperate to lock this down. I overheard him bragging to a partner. Said you'd be gone for good by the weekend." I thanked her quietly. She hurried away, checking over her shoulder like Derek himself was watching. Back in George's workshop that night, I played Ethan's last voicemail. The words hissed through the speaker. "You won't see another day on that ranch." George slammed his fist on the table. "That's it. He's cooked. Threats, forgery, fraud. He's unraveling." I stared at the stack of evidence. The fake deed, the party footage, the recordings. It was heavy, but not enough yet. Ethan still thought he could muscle through on speed and arrogance. I leaned forward, voice steady. "Then we've got 72 hours to finish this. He wants me erased by the weekend? Fine. By the weekend, he'll be the one gone." Tuesday morning, George phoned me with a tone I hadn't heard in years, like he'd just hit pay dirt on a construction bid. "Walt, get over here and bring Campbell." When I arrived at his workshop, the old laptop was hooked to a larger monitor. Campbell stood nearby, arms crossed, face unreadable. George hit play. The video was grainy, but clear enough. Ethan sat at a desk inside the county recorder's office, papers spread before him. A young clerk hovered nervously, glancing at the door. "Watch close," George muttered. On the screen, Ethan pressed a pen to the deed line, his wrist stiff, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth. The strokes were jerky, deliberate, the same stilted loops that scarred the forged copy I'd been given. Campbell froze the frame. "That's no natural signature. That's a man tracing." Then George resumed the footage. Ethan slid a fat envelope across the desk. The clerk hesitated, then tucked it into a folder like it was routine. The timestamp in the corner matched the very day my consent supposedly arrived at the bank. My stomach turned, watching my own son bribe his way into stealing my land. There was no mistaking it now. Campbell straightened his tie, voice firm. "Mr. Hall, this is decisive. With this video, the forged deed, and the recordings, we're not just asking for an injunction. We're opening him up to criminal charges. Fraud, forgery, bribery. George grinned like a wolf. He thought nobody was looking, but cameras don't lie. I leaned on the workbench, exhaling slow. Weeks of humiliation, sleeping in a truck, whispers in the diner. Suddenly, the weight shifted. The ground was back under my boots. Campbell snapped the laptop shut. Tomorrow morning, we file for an emergency hearing. I'll request an asset freeze and immediate review of the loan. Once a judge sees this, Ethan won't touch a dime. George clapped me on the shoulder. Told you he'd hang himself. All we had to do was let him. That night, I parked outside the ranch one last time. Lights glowed through the windows, shadows of Ethan and Megan moving across walls that used to hold my life. For the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost staring in. I felt like a man with the truth on his side. Ethan thought he'd buried me with paperwork, but now I had him on tape, pen in hand, caught red-handed. And tomorrow, I'd bring the whole house of cards crashing down. The courthouse in Pima County smelled of old paper and lemon polish. Campbell walked beside me, calm as a man headed to breakfast. George followed, his boots loud on the tile floor, carrying the weight of 30 years of friendship. Inside the courtroom, Ethan sat at the defense table with Megan. He looked polished, new suit, hair slicked back, but his eyes flickered when he saw me. Megan kept her chin high, though her hands trembled when she adjusted her necklace. The judge entered, and the room quieted. We are here to review the contested deed transfer and loan application concerning the property of Mr. Walter Hall. Campbell rose. Your Honor, the evidence will show clear fraud, forgery, and bribery. Ethan's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. My client filed all documents legally. Let's see about that, Campbell replied. First came the deed itself. Campbell placed the certified copy on the screen, then projected my real signatures beside it. Tax returns, pension checks, even my old construction permits. The differences glared like neon signs. Stroke analysis confirms this is a forgery, Campbell said. Different pressure, different rhythm. It is not Mr. Hall's hand. The judge scribbled a note. Noted. Next, Campbell played the neighbor's video. Ethan and Megan dragging my recliner, laughing. Ethan's beer raised like a toast. Good riddance, finally free of the old man. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Megan dropped her eyes. Ethan shifted, jaw tight. Then Campbell pulled the trump card. Exhibit C, Your Honor. On the big screen, the recorder's office camera rolled. Ethan, stiff-wristed, tracing my name. Then the fat envelope slid across the desk. The clerk pocketed it. Timestamp clear. The judge leaned forward, face hard. Mr. Patterson, is that you? Ethan's lawyer stammered. The footage could be misinterpreted. Answer the question, the judge barked. Ethan swallowed. Yes, but the judge slammed his gavel. Enough. The forged deed is void. The loan application is hereby frozen. Furthermore, this matter will be referred to the county prosecutor for charges of fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. Megan broke first, whispering, Ethan, what did you do? Ethan stood, shouting, he doesn't deserve that land. He wasted his life on it. I was building something better. The bailiff stepped forward as the judge's gavel cracked again. Order! Laura, sitting quietly in the back with Mrs. Alvarez, burst into tears. Her voice echoed through the room. Daddy, you lied to Grandpa. That sound hit harder than any ruling. Ethan's shoulders sagged as the bailiff cuffed him. Megan clutched her purse, face pale, knowing her world had just collapsed. I stood slowly, the weight of weeks lifting from my back. Campbell whispered, It's over. The ranch is yours again. I looked at Ethan as they let him out, wrists chained. You tried to throw me away like trash, son. But trash doesn't fight back. Fathers do. The doors closed behind him, chains rattling down the hall. And just like that, the house I'd built with Marlene was mine again.